Hi, I wanted to show you a little Photoshop technique I was demonstrating for my workshop group I did up in Ohio 2 weeks ago, and the group seemed to really like this. It's adding a digital matte to your photographs, which make them really stand out when you post them to your website or image sharing sites. So I do this in Photoshop using layers. It's a pretty simple process, but there are a couple little tricks to doing it just right, and I want to just go through that step by step, and I'm going to show you how I do this in Photoshop CS4. So I'm going to bring up a high resolution image file, and show you how to the steps I go through in doing this. The image that I'm selecting right now is a sunset image I did out at Burke's Beach here on Hilton Head Island last Sunday evening after we had a tropical storm. I forget what it was called, and it was offshore, but on the edge of that at sunset you get this incredible play of dynamics up in the sky with the clouds and colors, and it's just phenomenal. So this is one of the images that I shot. It's a high dynamic range. It's a 3 exposure image, completed using one exposure, a couple stops under, even 2 stops over, Photomatics Pro. Worked it through an aperture with some Nik plugins at it as well. So this is a high resolution version. It's a JPEG. The image size that I'm working with is an 8x12 at 300 DPI, so it's almost a 25 meg file. What I'm going to need to do is create another layer in Photoshop that will be the matte. And when I say matte, it's like, think of it as a frame picture that has that border around it. That's called a matte, and usually it's a different color, different width. For my photographs, almost all the time I like to use black because that seems to be the best background for nature and landscape images that I like to take. So I'm in Photoshop now with the image file open. I'm going to go up to File up here. I'm going to create a new file, and since the image is 8x12, I like to add 3 inches to the height and width, and that will give me a nice size matte to work with. So 3 inches added to 8 is 11 on the height, 3 inches added to 12 on the width is 15. I make sure the resolution is the same, and I make sure my color mode is the same as the image file, which in this case is RGB. So I'm going to click that. Now I've got a new layer, new file in Photoshop, and you notice that it's all white. I need to switch this to black. So the tool I like to use is over here in the Tools palette. There's this Paint Bucket tool. When I click on that, I want to make sure this is the color that I drop in is black. Now the Paint Bucket tool, you think of it as just a big bucket of paint, and you're going to throw it up against a wall, make that entire layer just that one color. So I got to make sure my colors, right now it's selected to more of an orange type color. I need to switch that to black, so I'm going to click on the color palette, and that opens up the color picker. I'm going to choose down here in the black. Now it should, if you look over here, this over here will go to black. Okay, I got my Paint Bucket selected. I'm going to drop that and turn that entire layer into a black layer. Now that's my matte. That's like, think of that as a matte board. Now I'm going to lay the photograph down right on top of it, but I need to make sure it's right in the center so that matte is evenly spaced on all sides. This is a little trick that some people don't realize they can do. On a Mac, when I'm on a Mac, I don't know what it would be on a PC. What I do is I select the image. Okay, make sure that image file is active. When I click on it, I'm going to hold down the Shift button, and then while I hold down the Shift button, I'm going to click and drag right over to the matte. And by holding down that Shift button, it centers that image file right smack in the middle where I want it to be, so I don't have to measure it up, and it's right in the middle. Okay, now the original image file I don't need anymore, so I'm going to do away with that. So now I've got this Photoshop document with two layers, the layer for the matte, the background, and the actual image. I make sure that the layer with the image is activated up here at the layers palette. Now this is a nice little touch I like to do, because sometimes on the edges where I've got things going really dark, the image almost gets lost in the matte. I like to separate it out just enough to make sure that there's a clean break between the matte and the actual photograph. So how I do that is I add a border or a hairline all the way around the edges of the image. To do that, I go down to, while I'm in the layers window or palette, I add a layer style, click on that, I go to stroke, and then I make sure the color is usually almost always white. So I'm going to switch that back to white on the color. If you notice, it already put it in, and it's at 3 pixels because that's the size I often use. I just don't want it to be too small, I don't want it to be too wide, just enough. So a 3 pixel hairline outlining the photograph in white. Okay, so there it is now, the effects in that layer added that nice little border all the way around. Now what I also like to do is add another line, and this is something that I learned when I prepared files for competition prints with the Professional Photographers Association up in Ohio. And it's always just a nice little, it adds a nice little classy touch to your photographs. And what I like to do is put another border just offset by about 1/4 inch all the way around, and it's another hairline, but not white. Here's a little trick too that makes your images really stand out, is choose a color within the photograph itself for the secondary border line. So I could choose this blue, I could choose kind of the yellowish to the orange, I could choose the green. You've got all 3 of those colors at play in this photograph. I think what will set this apart will be more in the line of that orange. That's a little bit too light right there. And if you notice how I did that, I selected, sometimes I'm jumping back so quickly I forgot to explain what I'm doing. In the tools palette, you choose the eyedropper tool. And when you have the eyedropper tool, okay, go into the photograph, and then you can choose a color. Just click on where you want to choose a color. And I'm going to choose that kind of that orange that's in the sky. So it's got that selected. Now I want to draw that line all the way around the edges. I need a ruler to work from. So I want to go up to View, Rulers. What this does, it gives me the guidelines of exactly where my pointer is in the layer, and it helps me keep things nice and even and all together. So with that selected, with the ruler showing, I'm going to go and I'm going to choose this line tool in the menu. I'm going to keep that, make sure that's the same width at 3 pixels as the border line, and I've got it selected where that line will be that color that I've already pre-selected with that eyedropper tool. Now I'm going to go up here, I'm going to watch the guidelines in the ruler, and I'm going to offset this line. I'm going to start it up here, I'm going to go to the 1/4 inch off there and a 1/4 inch off there. That tells me exactly where my line begins. It helps me determine where it's going to end and to keep everything nice and even. I'm going to click, go across the top. I'm going to go 1/4 inch off on the other side. Now if you notice that line is jagged, you just move it up until it's nice and smooth. That lets you know that it's perfectly straight. Okay, now I'm going to click off, so that's one layer for the top line. I don't want to move my cursor, I want to keep it right where I stopped when I go down, so I have a nice smooth corner on this line. I'm going to go down, I'm going to take that down to a 1/4 inch just off here. I'm going to straighten it out, okay, right there, hold on, and right about there. Now I'm going to move, that's the second layer. Now I'm going to move the third layer for the bottom. I'm going to go out a 1/4 inch this way, and I'm going to look at this guideline up here, okay, like that, just there. And then it actually will tell me that everything's lined up there. Go up here, and I am lined up on top. Got 4 different layers, 4 different lines. Now to bring them all together, all I need to do is go and flatten the layers. Okay, so now they're all together, and they should be all even right here at the corners, nice and smooth. So I have this nice little hairline that really sets the image off nicely. So I don't need the rulers anymore. Okay, now what I like to do is save this version as what I call a high-res JPEG version for making a print. First I want to make sure my profile is Adobe RGB, so I'm going to assign the profile. Adobe RGB is best for making desktop prints, or usually in sending to some printers. More printers are getting more set up to use do handle files as sRGB. For my high-res versions, I still like to do Adobe RGB. You notice the colors snapped up a little bit more. So this is my high-resolution version for me to print from. So I'm going to save that as what I call see Sunset on Dunes high-res. Okay, that's just what how I like to file name. So I'm going to save that over to my desktop. Okay, so I've got the high-res version at the highest quality because that's what I'm going to print from. So that's my printable version. Now I need a version to put up on the web, my website, on Flickr, the Facebook page, all those things. So this is, I don't want to post my printable version, the high-res version. I want to keep that safe, so I need to make a low resolution version that will look really good on a screen. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up to here, and I'm going to go up to the top menu where it says Image, and I'm going to go down to Duplicate. So this is going to make an exact copy of that high-res version. I'm going to close that. So now I've got a duplicate copy. This is what I'm going to turn into the low-res version. First, I'm going to assign a profile, sRGB, that is made to go for displaying images on screens, but you notice the color went down. So I always like to build back in when I switch the profiles from RGB to sRGB, is to bring back in a little bit more saturation. Now my preferred way of doing that is going up to Adjustments, Vibrance, and in Vibrance adjust your saturation. That's a little trick I learned a while back. It's a little bit more effective than just straight increasing saturation from this menu option. So I've bumped sRGB, bumped up the saturation. Now I need to resize it, and I'm going to just take it down to 72 dpi. It's a good screen resolution at 1080 by 792. It's a reduction, so bicubic sharper. Okay, so now I'm getting my low-res version. I want to bring that back up on the screen so you can see it better. Now, two more steps that make it finally web ready that I like to do is put in my logo as a kind of a copyright right down here, kind of a digital signature. But I have a logo that is professionally done by a graphic artist, and what she provided was a logo in different file formats, and a couple of them are EPS and PNG, which are vector files. Vector files mean that they will have a transparent background. So I always have a file where I keep my logos in, and under logo. And I'm going to use an EPS vector file. It's the white version. I have a black version if I were making a white matte. Since it's a black matte, I'm going to have the white logo. And I'm going to open that logo art. I'm going to switch it over to RGB because that's what I'm working in. And now I have my logo. See that checkerboard background? That means it's transparent. Now I need to move this logo onto here, so I'm just going to drag. And it's a little bit too large, so what I'm going to do here is click the layer that has a logo. I'm going to go up to transform, scale, and then I'm going to reduce it down to about there. Now if you notice when I did that, I held down the shift key when I reduced it down, and when I grabbed the corner, that keeps it proportioned so it doesn't get warped. Apply. Now I got the size I want. It's a little bit, still a little bit too big. And scale that down a little bit more. There we go. That's about right. So there, and I move it. I usually like to put it in the lower right hand corner. Sometimes I'll put it over in the lower left hand corner depending on the composition of the image. For now, for this one, I'm just going to keep it right here. Okay, so now I've got the logo, I've got my nice border, and I'm going to flatten that down. Now I need to save for web, and I make sure that it embeds the sRGB color profile so the color stays consistent when it goes up on the web. And I'm going to save for web to my desktop, and this version, instead of HighRes copy, I like to call it FW. Okay, there. But you know what, I just remembered there's a step I forgot. Sorry. Really important before you put something up on the web as far as images, you build in your metadata. To do that, you go to File, File Info, and this is where you can build in metadata via Photoshop. You can, more often than not, I do this in Aperture. You could also do it in Lightroom, where you just dune, sunset, sky, title. You know, you want to make sure you call yourself the photographer, artist, something like that. So a title goes into search engine, how search engines pick up as well. And oops, there. A lot of this has already been entered in so many times it just comes up. Sunset, sky over Brooks Beach, Hilton Head, Island, fine art, landscape photography by Jim Crotty. Now keywords, that's the information you're building into the file, so when this image goes up, because an image on the web is basically data. With the metadata, you're building in keywords into the image file that search engines will pick up. So, you know, Hilton Head, Island, landscape, beach, dunes, sunset, lots of any kind of descriptive words that you want people to use, how they want to find, you want them to find your photograph on the web. Sunset, peaceful. The word that I hear a lot is about my work is calm, calming. Obviously your name, photography, photographer, print, art. You know, you can go on and on and on. The more keywords, the better, but keep them descriptive to the image. And the copyright information should be your name or your business name, your address, phone number, email, website. So it's very clear within this file of who the artist is and who that work belongs to, especially when you send something up on the web. So now the metadata is built in, and the image has been resized properly. I'm going to save for web, and I just keep this embed color profile checked. I don't usually check the progressive or optimize. I look for the size. This is a nice size. It's 471. It's under 1 megs. So I'm going to call this file, instead of HighRes, so I know this is the version for the web, I'm going to call it FW at the end for web. and I'm going to save it. And now I've got, don't need that working version anymore. Now I have both the high-res printable version and the version ready to go up on the web, which is nice because we've got this nice looking finished professional looking photograph with a nice border around with metadata, photographer's logo. Looks great, ready to go. So thank you very much, and I hope this helps and explains what I explained before in the workshop of how to make a digital matte. Thank you.